everybody. Welcome to this episode of Bullets, Barbells, and Barbecue. I'm your host, Brett. I got Chris, the artist formerly known as Heavy C, with me. I have Matt. I have Tanner, the head. And we have a special guest, Lane, like the movie Grease.
Spelled differently.
Spelled differently, but
that's important.
It means the same. His hip-hop group was Grease and Grime, if you didn't know.
Check them out on YouTube.
We'll go over our show partners first. We have Elite Nutrition Omaha, elitenutritionomaha.com. Use code B3 if you go in the store, especially when Steve is working. Yell it really loud.
Really loud.
Yeah, yell B3 and get your free shaker.
He came out of the back. He goes, "Who the hell's yelling?" It was just someone who yelled B3. They wanted to shake.
Like he knows that they get the shakers. He just thinks these dickheads keep coming in and yelling.
He does.
Okay.
We also have Rosewood Block. They make the best cutting boards in the barbecue game. Check them out, rosewoodblock.com. Use code B3 for 10% at checkout. So let's get on with Lane. Lane does competitive pistol shooting, right? You're not a 3-gun, you're a pistol.
Correct. I occasionally shoot 3-gun, but...
And also a black belt under Rodrigo, under John Hansen, right?
Under John, yeah. So,
Are you guys still with that whole lineage with Rodrigo then too?
yeah. So John is a Rodrigo black belt, but John promoted me to black belt. So yeah, I'm in the lineage, but John's my, I don't know what
Sensei?
It's my sponsor.
Your master?
My guru. I don't know, like how far down we want to go on that, but
He's a master of baiting and whatever else.
hey,
Yeah. But what do you compete under for pistol comp?
So primarily I compete in what's called USPSA, which is like United States Practical Shooting Association, which is invariably, if you've seen shooting sports like on any sort of like, YouTube videos or TV, as long as it's not people that are wearing like the brown fishing vests and they're running around and shooting stuff with pistols, it's almost a guarantee that that's what it was, is USPSA. So it's what we call practical shooting, or they'll call it like action shooting sometimes is the term they'll use for it.
Okay. And so you travel all over.
Yeah. Yep.
What's your best shoot you've done?
As far as performance or as far as like the best match?
Let's go both.
Good one. Well, so the scoring is a little weird. So the highest finish that I've had at nationals was in 2020. I finished 6th, but it's kind of a percentage base. So it'd be kind of similar to like powerlifting, where it's like, your actual place doesn't necessarily matter as much as like your total does. So my place was pretty high there, but my percentage was like 90%. And then in 2022, I finished 9th, but I shot like 93 something percent. So that was the best finish by percentage or finish by numbers. And then as far as like the best like match, that's kind of a tough one, but like Talladega. So they had nationals at Talladega in 2021 and 2022. And that was it's a very good range. It's like the CMP range there, which is enormous. It's far and away the biggest range complex I've ever been on. There's just ranges everywhere, and it was good stages. It was, it's like the weather was good. We didn't have to, like, our Airbnb was like a cabin that wasn't very far away. So it was like
nice.
all the things were good, whereas like when you do matches in like Florida, the closest you can stay is like 45 minutes away. So it's just like every day an hour and a half of driving on top of whatever else. And yeah.
So when you talk about your scoring, you do so your percentage is more like your personal best, but the scoring overall, I mean, you might shoot 90%, maybe not your best, but it's still better than everybody else.
Correct. Yeah. So the way that it works, and it's interesting this way, because I would say it's similar to other sports that like are specifically measurable. It's kind of comparable to like golf or track or like weightlifting or something like that, where it's like, obviously like you want to place, like high, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's also like you would rather shoot a higher percentage, because like the winner has 100%. He's the guy with the most points, so he is the 100. And then obviously however many points you scored in the match just determines what your percentage is. So if you're like, hey, Lane, would you rather finish 2nd in the nation but shoot 92% of the winner, or would you rather finish 10th but shoot 98%? For me, it's 98%, because I'm closer to winning that, being 10th at 98%, than I was being 2nd at 92. If that makes sense, because it's just, you're talking total points when it comes to that. So,
So it's not your actual like shots on target like percentage. You're just the winner is the bar.
yeah. So we're trying to like it's the scoring. It's kind of complex, or at least it sounds like it when you're new to it. So it's like, so you every stage is worth a certain number of points, and it's just strictly based on how many targets and how many shots there are. So whoever has the best score on that stage gets 100% of the points. So if it's a 100-point stage,
Gotcha.
Matt shoots the best hit factor score. Matt gets 100 points. And then I get a number of points that are just associated with what percentage of Matt I shot. So if Matt shot a 100% and I finished 90%, I would get 90 points on that stage. Okay, Nationals is 22 stages, and so you're gaining points throughout the whole match. Like it's kind of similar to like golf or whatever. Where it's like you're racking up scores like hole to hole to hole.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get done, you have some sort of total. And so then like your percentage just be like, I don't know, throughout a whole match, you scored 2,000 points and I scored 1,800 points. Like, okay, just figure out your percentages like on that. So it's not that they assign me like a score or whatever. It's just that you're totaling the whole time on it.
So to win the whole thing, you don't have to win each range. Like you just
don't have to win any
your goal is like you just want to score high on each one. And if you're like third on each one, then you could take out and like win the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And honestly, you don't really want to try to win stages, because what tends to happen, I mean, depending on the kind of stages that you have, are that like a lot of guys, we call it going like zero or hero, which is where like, hey, this guy will just try to absolutely burn this stage down. But if you don't hook up, he'll have some makeup shots, maybe he'll have a miss or something like that. Whereas it's like what you want to do, like if you're trying to win nationals, you want to shoot 93 or 95% on every stage. You do that, you're probably going to win. You don't need to filter in a couple 100% in there. You just need to shoot very well consistently across the whole thing. You don't want a whole bunch of like, oh man, I had a 98 and a 99 and a 100 over here, and oh cool, and then a 62 and a 71, and like you don't want that. Like you just want to be like pretty consistent.
If you had, which I'm sure it probably doesn't happen that way, but say you have the guy that sets the standard on that, and you say you're right there with him, and each event you guys both tie, right? Because he's the standard, and you both 100% each one, but he sets it first. Who wins that then? Would he win because he set the standard?
Nope, you both get the points. So the points, like this is like what I think confuses some people, is like you're not really competing against the other guy, you're competing against the stage. Like I think the best thing I can compare it to is kind of like golf. It's like you're competing against the hole, right? Like it's like, so if Matt goes out in golf and he hits he gets a 4, so he gets par on this hole, and I get par. Like we both have the same number of strokes. And shooting is very similar. So like, let's say you go out and it's a 10 hit factor stage. You hit 10.0000 hit factor. That's a 100. I go out and match you exactly 10.0000. You get all the stage points. I get all the stage points. Because that's all that it's based off of. Is,
okay, so it's your total points at the end, kind of.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now that's not just shots on target, though, right? That's also like your time, right? Because you're timed on this whole thing.
Yeah. So the way that hit factor scoring works is it's points divided by time. So a stage will be worth a certain number of points, and it's based on how many shots you're required to take on that. So let's say for example, it's a stage that requires 10 hits. So that would be a 100-point stage. 10 hits would be a 50-point stage. So now, then how you determine hit factor would be like, okay, like if you have, so we said it's a 50-point stage. Let's say you go out and shoot 10 alphas. So you get 50 points, and you did it in 5 seconds. So you have 50 points, 5 seconds, comes out to 10 hit factor. So now let's say I go out and I shoot, I shoot 40 points. So I put a couple Charlies out there. I'm not quite as accurate, but I do it in 4 seconds. 40 divided by 4, 10 hit factor. So you and I would tie on that stage. Or conversely, let's say I go out and shoot 5 seconds like you did, but I shot 40 points. Okay, like do the math on that. So that's
80.
Exactly. That's 80, 80 points, 80% on that. So it'd be 40 points on that particular stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
It's honestly like it is really confusing when you start doing stuff, and then once you get accustomed to it, it just makes total sense. Because basically, what the scoring is, it's a measure of productivity. So it's
how productive you are in the time you have.
Exactly. Yep. So what it comes down to is points divided by time. So it's points per second. So in that example, what we were saying is that like, hey, Brett was out there for every second that he was shooting, he was scoring 10 points. And every second that I was shooting, I was scoring 8 points. So it's just like, and that's how the scoring works. And then depends on this, like, so in that example, that would be like a very short course and a very fast course. So the hit factors are very high. But now let's say you take like a 32 round field course. So like 32 rounds, 160 points, but it's like a 20-second stage. Well, now your accuracy matters much, not more, but your accuracy starts to count for a lot greater percentage than the time does, because there's so many more points, compared to time. So that's where so the hit factor will go down, which means that the points start to matter more. So now I can't get away with shooting a couple of Charlies or throwing a Delta or something out there. I've got to really be plugging alphas as I go. On that, if that kind of makes sense.
And for those who haven't seen the target, you're talking like when you say Alpha Charlie, like you have these silhouettes and like the center is your A and then B, C, D is you kind
of. There's 3 scoring zones. Yep. So you have like your cardboard silhouette. So you have like a 6x12 rectangle in the middle. It's called the Alpha. You also have a credit card size one in the head. So that's worth 5 points. Outside of that, you have what's called the Charlie. So the Charlie is worth 3 points, and then the furthest out is called a Delta. Delta's worth 1 point, at least in the division that I shoot in. So it's like, so you start to be penalized very severely once you get away from alphas, like shooting division.
So you don't have a Bravo. There's no
No. So they used to. So what it used to be was the Bravo was the head part of the target that wasn't the credit card Alpha, and I think wisely. Then what they did is they finally were like, listen. All that Bravo scores the same as a Charlie, it just designates that it was like in the head, so it's kind of just a waste.
Oh, gotcha.
So now it's just all Charlie. Yeah. So it's just it's just one of those like needlessly specific designations. But
so you don't get any extra points for it. It's just
exactly. Yep.
Like good job, bud.
So like your draw time and all that is going to be a factor, obviously, right? Because the timer starts, or does the timer start off first shot?
So the way that it works is, so you guys have all seen, your little Pocket Pro timers, your little packed timers. So obviously, so the RO hits it. Once it beeps, time's going. So it goes from beep to last shot. So it's running as soon as it goes off. So you're right. So whatever takes place before you get your first round off, all that counts. So I would say the majority of the stages you just start loaded and holstered, but it's very common to also have to like pick up off of a table or off of a barrel. Or they'll make you start unloaded in the holster, so you have to draw, load, then start rocking and rolling. Sometimes you have to draw, and they'll require like magazines have to start on table, so you have to go up and you have to kind of stuff your magazines in your pouches real quick and then run off and do whatever. But yeah, the clock's running the whole time.
So what's your draw time then? I've heard it's fast, but I don't know if it's true. I've heard it's under a second, but
I mean, I can do under a second draws for sure.
That's impressive.
But it's also one of those where like the draw time doesn't matter that much. I mean, it can't be terrible.
It's how fast you can get on target.
Well, it's that, but it's also like, so if you look at like, I don't know why I'm like comparing everything to golf so much. I don't even golf at all, but it's like it is kind of similar to like your driver in golf, right? It's like how many times do you get the big dog out and like get to smoke one? Like, I mean, at most 18 times in an 18 hole match, right? That's the absolute most. And drawing is the same thing in competition shooting. So if you have a 22 round match like nationals, the absolute most number of times that you could draw total would be 22. However, that's probably going to be like a 400 round like match or 450 round match. So yes, you don't want to be slow. You need to make sure you get a good grip. You don't want to waste any extra time, but it also, that represents like just a sliver of what the stage is. Whereas like your transitions, target to target, your moving position to position, your reloads and all that stuff account for way more time. So it's one of those where it's like, it's interesting when you kind of look at like the, like the bell curve or kind of like the Dunning-Kruger, which is like when you first get interested in pistol shooting and stuff like that, it's always like 1 second. Like you want from concealment, 1 second, 7 yards, like alpha or whatever. And it's like, then you start shooting matches and you're like, well, okay, it's more important that I'm just not slow and that I get a really good grip. And then you'll kind of come back around again where you get like really good. And it's like, okay, now I still need to be really fast, but it's still the most important that I get a really good grip and like get everything on that. So it's kind of it works itself back around on that.
That's like in the fire service, they talk about like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So as long as like you're smooth and you're error free, that's way better than being fast and having a hiccup.
I thought it was loose as fastened on the edge of out of control.
Yeah.
Still Days of Thunder.
Robin's racing, all right, you know.
And I know there's different classes. You and I have talked before, and obviously you have, and that's based on your pistol that you're shooting, right? Like
For the divisions, yep.
Yeah, sorry, different divisions that way. Because obviously you've been doing this for a while. I'm assuming you're in more of a, however you want to call it, an advanced division.
Are you in the Masters?
Fuck off, man.
So the way that the divisions are broken down, it's just by equipment.
So you could be your first time, but you could come in with highest end equipment and look. I always say I'd rather look good and lose than look bad and win.
Yeah,
Can't be the part, look the part.
I mean that's exactly the way to do it.
Look how much money this guy spent to suck.
Yeah, but look how nice his pistol looks.
He's jazzing.
I know you see plenty of that too.
Oh, I
'cause
bet.
So for the most part, it's kind of like production division is kind of like the base level sort of division. I mean, it's internationally, it's far and away the most competitive because like so many countries have like restrictions on stuff. So
And the level of entry is obviously
it costs less for sure. Because like production, it's iron sights. You're limited. You can only load 10 rounds in your magazine. You have to shoot like minor power factors. You have to shoot a 9mm basically. So production division is a very you have to be very disciplined to shoot it, but you also don't have to buy that nice of equipment comparatively. And then you kind of just start to go from there. So you get into like limited division, still uses iron sights, but now you could have single action guns. You can have mag wells. You can load your magazines to capacity. So you could have up to 21 or maybe 22 rounds shooting 40 cal. Then you get into carry optics division that I shoot. So you can't have mag wells or anything, but you obviously have to have a slide mounted dot. You can load your magazines to capacity. Then you get into like open division. So open division are all the super like space guns that you see where it's like compensators, slide rackers, mag wells. Like, frame mounted dots. So the dot's not even like moving with the slide. It's like, I mean, to have an open gun that functions like reliably, that's a unicorn. I hate being squatted with open guys because their shit never works. But it's also like, you're probably like minimum $6,000 investment for like an open gun that like will work. But you have to have two of them because you got to have a backup gun when you go to a match. So you're like 12 grand in. Yeah, like if you buy it new, like you could buy somebody's used stuff and probably, but it's it would still be a $6,000 gun.
Yeah,
that guy already got some usage out of it. But yeah, it's so you can go down, you can go off the cliff real quick with that.
So in the like manufacturer division, like that entry level division, are you like can you have people you run in like Glocks versus people who just go and buy like a staccato?
So in that particular division, and like I don't want to try not to like, there are a lot of restrictions. So you can't run a staccato, like you can't run a single action gun that. So it has to be, or you can't run a single action only gun like 2011s and stuff. So you could shoot like I shoot CZ Shadow 2, so it's a double action single action gun, and it has to be run on double action for your first trigger pull. But striker fire guns, your double action, single action guns, like all that, totally fine, totally legit. Yeah, totally. And honestly, that's like why that division was like invented in the first place. Was basically like, hey, so like somebody could run what would be otherwise like just a very good like a Glock 17, Glock 34 kind of gun and be competitive, and then you kind of work your way like how crazy do you want to go on stuff after that? Like.
You guys load all your own ammo too? Isn't there something about having like lighter striking ammo to reduce recoil, but it still knocks the targets down? Yeah,
so it's like typically it's not that you're trying to load the ammo lighter. I mean, obviously, like you don't want it to be unnecessarily
hot,
hot for sure. And compared to like carry ammo, it'll be a little bit lighter, but it'd basically be like any factory like ammo that you would buy for training. The main thing about loading your own ammo, it's cost. Is just because like I'll probably shoot 40,000 rounds a year. So like, I can load it cheaper, like on my own press, but then it's also like, I want to tailor the particular round that I'm loading for the gun and for the division that I'm shooting. So my division requires a minimum power factor. So you have to have, so the round that you fire, you have to go over to the chronograph at major matches. So they'll weigh your bullet, like the actual, like bullet projectile, and then they'll fire like a minimum of 3 rounds through your gun, and it has to meet like a certain, it's an equation basically of like your bullet weight times your velocity, and it has to meet a bare minimum. So you can't be shooting like mouse fart, cowboy action loads because one, it won't knock down steel like you said, but also it won't meet the minimum power factor on that. So it's always a little bit of a balance because it's like you said, you don't want it to be unnecessarily hot. But if you get yourself too close to power factor and you get a weird chronograph or a cold day or something, and then you don't make it, like it's just a zero, like you're done. Like, you don't
even get to play.
Yeah, at least in my division, because I shoot minor power factor. In some of the other divisions, you shoot a different power factor, so you score different points. And if you don't make major power factor, then you get bumped down to minor. And if you're shooting open division or limited division and you get bumped down to minor, you basically can't be competitive. So you're just playing for fun at that point.
Yeah.
If you're doing like manufacturer though, are you just running just straight like store bought load then, or can you?
Yeah.
Is anybody loading their own on those, or can you even load your own?
What do you mean? I guess
Like on your ammo, as far as like if you're just doing like manufacturer, like I'm just going to show up with my
Entry level division.
entry level. You know, I'm
that's
just,
totally fine. Yeah.
and but can you load your own? Or are you restricted to only like?
No, you can. Yeah. There's no restriction on where your ammo comes from.
Okay.
It has to meet. Like
Whatever
the
spec.
Yeah, whatever
For you,
the minimum.
it's cost. It's cost.
Yes. Yep. And it's like if you're going to shoot like the local match, like if one of you guys were going to come out there, I would be like, hey, just go out to Shields and buy yourself like 250 rounds of like Blazer brass or Winchester white box or something like that, and come out. Like that would be totally fine. Yep. I mean, one, it would make power factor, but also like that would be the easiest way to do it. So. Yeah.
So at nationals, you said there's 20 or 22 stages. So who gets all the brass after that, and who picks all that up? There's got to be a machine, right? And then afterwards, you guys just fight over the brass. Hey.
No, so it's funny because like that's actually like one of the perks for like the ROs, like the people that work the match, like when they go out to those major matches, is that they get to go like
pick up all the brass.
Yeah, they get to go. Like I call them like brass goblins or rich goblins. they'll get to go like brass goblin like the stages. But yeah, no, it's funny because like at major matches, they're usually called what are called like lost brass matches because like if you go out to locals, you have somebody shooting open division. So most of the most reliable open division guns are 38 super comp. So it's like a 9x21 or 9x23 or whatever. So it's like, I mean, you're used to seeing like 9x19, like 9mm Luger. Well, now expand that out like 38 super comp. Well, that brass is super hard to find and really expensive. So whenever you have like local guys, and I have one guy who's just in my, like I just imagine him right now. Like he's a great dude, but he's like, he will go out and shoot. And the second he gets done, we're like scoring the targets and he's over there like I always just call, that's why I call them like range chickens or range goblins. Cause he's always over there just like pecking at the ground, like picking up all this brass. And like all the open guys, they have their own way that they mark their brass, like this guy uses a red and green Sharpie and like, that's how he marks it. So he knows that's his 38 super comp.
Taking it back to golf, it's like when you mark your ball.
Exactly. Yeah. Because otherwise, like if they got to go buy that stuff, it's expensive. Whereas like 9mm, obviously not. So it's very easy to buy that anywhere. But no, it's a good question because I would like some of the like bigger ranges, like they won't have somebody go out explicitly and clean it up, but invariably, like because even at Eastern Nebraska Gun Club down here, there's people who will like have like a little side hustle where they'll go down there with a bucket and they'll pick up brass all day and then they'll go home and like clean it and tumble it or whatever and they'll sell it to people. So there's people at like those big ranges that do the same thing. And
how'd you get into it?
I've always liked to shoot a lot and I'm really competitive, and I suppose at some point it was always gonna like find a way to intersect on that. I mean, if we want to talk about intersectionality, I don't know if that's like a typical topic.
Yeah, that's definitely yeah, we're big supporters.
But no, I got like when I got out of the Marine Corps, I kind of took a break on like shooting. Like I would go out and like mess around with like some of my old like World War I, World War II rifles and stuff. But then I kind of got into pistols when I started carrying, and it kind of just built up a little bit at a time, which is like, hey, once you start carrying, but you get a little serious, so you kind of start trying to figure out like, hey, like what are some standards I should be able to meet as like a as a guy who shoots or whatever. And so kind of start farting around with that, and then so then I kind of started like okay, hey, I'd watch this guy's videos, or I went to a couple of classes or whatever, and then like people would talk about like, oh hey, USPSA. And like at the time I was living up in like Storm Lake. I was the head strength coach at Buena Vista University up there, and we had like a range just outside of town I could go to, but there wasn't like competitions anywhere near there. And I moved down here at the very end of 2015 for like a few different reasons, but one of the reasons was I knew that there were competitions like down here, and I was like, hey, I want to, I'm from like 40 minutes north, so that was part of it as well, and all that. But I was like, hey, I want to be somewhere where there's like, I can kind of start to do that stuff. And I didn't know I was going to become super serious about it, but it's just like, it's like anything else. Like once you get like bit, and
Yeah.
you're like, all right, I'm in. This is what this is just what I do now. Like.
And now you're sponsored at this point, right?
I mean, I have a couple sponsors, yeah, but it's kind of a big misnomer where it's like all of us that wear jerseys, like nobody pays me to shoot. Like I get discounts on like reloading equipment or other stuff like that. And if I win matches, then like I'll get like a dollar amount worth of like supplies of this or that or whatever.
Yeah.
But like nobody walks.
You're not
up.
getting checks.
Exactly. Nobody walks up after a match with a 4 foot by 3 foot check and is like, "Here you go, Lane. Like, I think you can get your grandma's. You can buy your grandma's house back here if you want to come over these matches."
Like, yeah.
So you were Marine.
Yep.
Strength coach, black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you're a good shot. So don't fuck with you is what you're saying.
What it means is like I don't have a lot of people that care about me in my life. So I have a lot of free time.
You said you got into shooting, and that kind of led you that way. And I think that a lot of people have this. There's obviously you see these competitive sides and how people handle guns, and then you see people who are like scared to death of handling a gun. And I don't know if you do any. I know you have your, what is it called? Your series, your YouTube.
Oh, my Bashed in Black Performance.
There you go.
My business name, my channel name there. Yeah.
And do you do classes with people, like as far as even like handgun safety and stuff like that, and how to work with it, and kind of talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people have this, and you and I have talked about it, people have like this fear of guns, which to an extent you should not necessarily be scared of a gun, but you should obviously respect the gun.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's kind of some of the stuff you work with people to make them comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's like anything else, which is you just need like reps and familiarity. Like one of the examples I always use is like when you start driving, like it's kind of nerve wracking, and you kind of can't really do a whole lot of things. Like when you first start driving, I mean, I was like 12 or 13, like in a farm town, but it's like, man, like you're kind of like all focused on like, oh man, make sure I'm like holding on the wheel and like
10 and 2
checking
and
all
just-
this and that. And now you're driving on the interstate, 70 miles an hour, listening to a podcast, drinking an energy drink, yelling at your dog to shut up in the back while you give the finger to some guy who's like cutting you off or flashing with your brights. And you don't think anything about it. Like you're doing all these things. And like driving didn't become less dangerous,
Yeah.
but it's just that like you got accustomed to it. And I think like in that regard, firearms are like similar. And I'm, like to that specific conversation we were having is like, I always hate how like people kind of surrender language on things, because people would be like, oh, as long as you know what you're doing, like guns aren't dangerous. I'm like, no, guns are dangerous as shit. Why do you think I carry one? Like, why would I carry something that wasn't dangerous? But what that also means is that one, you need to have some training on how to like properly operate one, and then you absolutely need to respect like what it is and like what it does. But yeah, it's big time. Like anything else is, I think. One is like having somebody professionally like help you. And then I also think that having somebody who's not like your husband or your brother or something, I think that's huge. Like like we talk about this a lot in like the shooting world, which is that like invariably seek out anybody but like a male relative to teach you like firearm safety. And I don't say it in like a joking way. It's just because like it's one of those things. I mean, it probably applies to other aspects, but it adds. There's like too many relationship dynamics in that, whereas it's like, hey, like, if instead of Matt like trying to show his wife, like if Matt's just like, hey, just have this guy do all this stuff and I'll see you guys in 6 hours or whatever. Now you just kind of cut any of the, competitive relationship portions or the, oh, this is my brother, he's trying to show off. You're always telling me I'm doing things
wrong.
Yep. So like just kind of get a disinterested third party to do that. And then it needs to be something that you like do consistently. And then like one thing that I'm very big on, and I think I'm very fortunate in like my shooting related life and my jiu-jitsu related life, is that like I'm like Omaha is a shooting town, it's a fighting town, and I have like a couple different groups of friends within those realms that like are very serious about both of those. And so like one, we hold each other to account, but it also means that like when I go out training like with my buddies, there's not going to be any of this like 12 guns laid out on the tailgate while half the family sits at the picnic table and everyone's just grabbing this and that, walking around shooting at pumpkins on the ground or whatever. It's like when we go out to train, we're serious about it. Like we have a plan in mind, and like these guys are like professional gun handlers, and I like that because I think that one, you get what you allow as like an instructor, like a coach within that, but it's also like you are who you surround yourself with. So it's like if you kind of, it's like you take the gym, right? It's like if all your buddies are fat and like don't really work out, or when they come in here, they're texting on their phone all the time and occasionally go do a couple of frickin' like curls for the girls or whatever. And you keep, then, and you hang out with them in the gym. You can't be like, oh man, I can't believe that like I haven't gotten stronger in the last like 6 to 8 weeks. Like I read a Jim Wendler book once or something like that, where it's like, hey, if you surround yourself with like guys who come in here and like take it seriously, like they'll bring you along with them, and vice versa. So I think, just like holding yourself to a standard, but then also finding other people that like have a standard, and just kind of sticking yourself to that.
Yeah, looking at you had mentioned something about like having a certain level of competency, like when you show up for those competitions. And I've always thought like, not that there needs to be some kind of measurement, but when like you're carrying, if you were to give like a competency level for people who were to conceal carry, and you said, hey, you need to have this basic skill set down in order to be like a competent carrier, do you have a like opinion on what you should be able to do?
That's a tricky question, because what I've kind of established for myself in the last couple of years is that I'm no longer a qualification guy. I don't believe in it because like, and again, this is my personal opinion, but like if you establish a qualification, like let's say like, you guys live in Nebraska. I mean, I live in Iowa, but so you have like the Nebraska state qual. It is, X number of rounds from certain distances or whatever. That's just somebody's determination of minimum standards. But anytime that you introduce that, then you set like hey, once I've achieved this, I've met like a standard. So for my classes, I basically do no minimum standard, and I don't recognize a maximum standard. Like for me, it's just like, hey, you come to class wherever you're at. Like that I can't change. When you leave, you should be better, but I don't establish minimum competencies. And then, as far as like carrying, and this is a very like really common conversation you end up having with people when it comes to like, the gun world and whatever. And I should like state up front is like, I believe all gun laws are fake. I think Casey should sell machine guns like at the counter, but because it gets brought up a lot that like, oh, because Iowa went permitless carry there a couple years back, Nebraska went permitless carry like this year, and I think it's 37 or 38 states are permitless carry states, and it always gets brought up. It's like, oh, now you're going to have like every idiot who doesn't know what they're doing carrying a gun all the time.
They already had one.
It's like that.
Right. The idiots were already carrying guns.
They already own them, but also, from what I've observed, is people self-regulate on most of that. And you've probably had these conversations before, because I know I have, even not just strictly in like a training setting, which is where like you buy your wife a pistol, but she doesn't feel comfortable carrying it. So she doesn't carry it. So it's like, yes, I'm just using her as an example, but it's like, yes, she has a gun. Yes, she doesn't know how to use it. Yes, she could legally carry it, but she doesn't because she's not comfortable with it. And I think that's like a very common like thing is, for the most part, people self-regulate on that because they know, or they'll do stuff like carry with like no round in the chamber, or or shit like that. Whereas like, so I don't think that really, I don't think that it really matters, because I think for the most part they self-regulate when it comes to that. Whereas, almost the worst people are the worst people who get like just a smidge of training, and then now they're like, okay, boom, like now I know. Like,
now I'm a tier 1 operator.
Exactly. Start doing that, and it's the same in every realm.
And I just reholstered and shot myself. Yes, I watched 2 YouTube videos, and now I'm a pennies carrying, and my shirt got stuck in there, and I shot myself in the leg.
Yeah, so that's no, that's exactly it. And that's kind of my approach, which is that like, I don't think it's my place to ever tell somebody that they shouldn't, because it's also, it becomes a very slippery slope. It's like my mother, for example. My mother doesn't carry, but like my mom's 60, what is she, 63, 64. But she's kind of a little arthritic in the hands, and she doesn't see really, like, she's got glasses, but without her glasses, she's like blind as a bat. So if my mom was ever like, oh, such and such happened, I think I'm going to start carrying a gun, it's like, what would my realistic response if you try to kind of do the minimum standards thing would be like, well, whatever just happened that made you feel like you need to start doing this. If my response is, well, you need 6 to 8 weeks of like dedicated professional training to do that, that's kind of like a really dickhead thing to say to somebody, because you're like, hey, whatever you think is going on or whatever reason made you like decide on this, I'm saying, nope, sorry, pause.
Right.
Whereas it's like, hey, give someone some good advice, maybe give them a firearm, that kind of that's a little bit more set up towards where they're at, as far as their, current level of, skill or lack thereof. But also it's just like, then use that as a, hey, you are where you are, but like we got to work from there, and I think it's the same in a lot of realms, because it's like, it's very comparable to like, guys that come to jiu-jitsu or guys that come to the gym, right? It's like you had someone come in, fattest person you ever saw, and he's like, hey, I want to start working out. You would never be like, well, okay, you need to go to Planet Fitness, drop 150 pounds, then you can come back. And then, then Matt Fillingsness can waste his time on, like, you would never do that.
Right.
You'd be like,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Let's go pop on the bike for 10 minutes or whatever it is, and I think I kind of take a similar approach to that, but.
So I guess maybe it wasn't so much like going around it, but like, I guess more along drills or something to make people feel comfortable, because I know like I have some friends who carry, and they carry, but they don't feel like, and they've kind of said that like shit would have to get real bad before they would consider drawing their gun.
Yeah.
Like past the point that I'm like, well, I feel in that situation, like if I have it and you're considering it, and like you get to that situation, I wouldn't let it get that far before I took action. So I guess more to rephrase it would be, I guess drills to build people's confidence, to make them feel more competent in that carrying capacity, so that should the occasion arise, they're not like, oh,
Do you
I
think
don't
those
feel
people
comfortable
aren't competent, or do you think they're just not willing to use the firearm?
I don't.
I
think
always always tell people that.
I don't
I'm
think
like,
they
are
feel
you willing
comfortable
to
enough,
use
because
it?
I think using a firearm and drawing and shooting is a perishable skill. Like you could go through and do a bunch of stuff and you feel good and like you get that skill drained in, but then if you're not using it, like you can pull a gun, sure, like that's there, but like to remember how to get on target and to not overshoot and do a bunch of
I'm just saying the mindset to actually,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. That's what I'm talking.
Well, yeah. Are you when you draw, you're when you point a gun at somebody, you're planning to kill them. Are you
willing to
okay
do
with that?
Yeah, that's
Well, I think that's to
I
your
am 100% okay with it.
Yeah, I think it's to your point that people self-regulate,
Yeah.
right? So like, okay, I'll carry, but it's going to have to get bad, right? They're not. Most people aren't just like, hey, let's go fucking shoot people.
Yeah.
And that's well, and like what you were saying earlier is like when you have like constitutional carry, which you should just be able to carry. You don't need a freaking permit for it.
Right.
But with that, everyone's like, oh, everyone's going to be shooting people. Like it doesn't happen because people self-regulate. Like most people aren't like, hey, let's just go. Oh, a constitutional carry, I can go shoot people now. That's not the way the average person.
Well, that kind of goes. What are you talking about? Gun laws. I mean, gun laws were way less back in the day, and there was less gun crime.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, gun laws are way more stringent now, and there's more gun violence than there ever has been.
Well, it's a cultural issue, and that's a whole like other like road we could go down. Like I have no problem talking about that. But to try to answer Matt's question maybe in a better way, like, there's any number of like drills, and me trying to like explain them out in words kind of sucks. So it's one of those like if someone has asked actual question, they could just contact me. But I mean, you should be able to. Like a very general standard would be like, like a 1.5 second draw from whatever your carrier duty gear is to an alpha at 7 yards on a standard like USPSA target. That's a very, very low level like standard. But to do that, you have to basically be able to do all the mechanics of drawing a firearm, presenting and firing like correctly. So it's a very low standard, but it's, so like you can kind of start there. And then there's any number of, like drills and things you could do. I would say, like one, you should be dry firing at least 1 day a week, every week. So if people don't know, like, so dry fire is where like you'll fire, but with your gun unloaded.
Do you have one of those? I was not to interrupt you, but do you use the iTarget or any of the AccuTarget stuff with the laser setups?
I don't know. I know those have become kind of popular, and again, not to like go off on a tangent. They're kind of not well thought of in the really serious shooting circles. for a few like very specific training mechanics kind of things, that would honestly be, I don't personally give that much of a crap, but it's kind of one of those where like, I like the cert guns and stuff for like, if you're like using them to demonstrate and doing some forms of training, but like sometimes when you use like the Mantis X stuff or like the cert different things, it tends to make people do mechanically weird things with the gun, trying to like determine where hits are and stuff because of the way that it works versus like what we do, like where the bread and butter of like a good pistol training or rifle training program for that matter is just in dry fire. So for example, we're in this room here, you could take a couple of cardboard targets, and I mean, you could scale them down if you wanted to, just put them on the wall, and I'm just drawing and just like transitioning target to target. I could draw and I could run 2-3 steps like real hard into this position, shoot target to target. So I'm doing the dry fire training stuff. So like dry fire, especially at the lower level, should comprise the majority of your training, and it's probably the most overlooked thing because it's like like a good dry fire session, like 10 minutes is more than enough. I mean, and realistically, you probably can't do more than 10 or 15 minutes in one go if you're actually squeezing the gun the way you should be and stuff. Like, you should be fatiguing yourself. Like, if you're able to, like, dry fire for an hour, you're not doing it right because you should be fatiguing yourself on that. And it's like, I waste more than 10 minutes every day, like, in the bathroom. Like, I have 10 spare minutes a day to dry fire.
Do you dry fire in there?
Like, I don't want to answer whether I do or don't,
he totally does.
Listen, I could be attacked in a public bathroom, so I got to be ready to rock and roll in there.
That changes your mechanics for real right there.
Big time.
Gotta pull my jeans up a little bit and fish it out of there. But no, it's just like, so all of your drills should have some basic component of like target acquisition, drawing, transitioning, and then you can scale up from there. And that's one thing that like competition shooting does so well, and the training for it is because like essentially like the timer's always running and the targets are scored. So it's like you can always try to do it faster. So it's like, hey, if you can shoot all alphas at, I don't know, 5 seconds, okay, do it in 4.5, do it in 4. Like always trying to get, faster on that. And then this might be, if this is like down the wrong road, like, tell me, but like, then I think to like your specific question, as far as people, feeling like, oh, hey, like I would never let it get to that point, or, oh, if you got to that point, I got to draw it. That's where like you've got to get training. And that's where like the majority of my focus around like the type of classes I teach is, to teach people to deal with like actual violence, but also to expose them to a little bit of that, because it's like once you start kind of dealing with it, like, man, like it's a whole different kettle of fish, because it's like, I think a lot of times you kind of build it up, and maybe in some ways you kind of envision like the active shooter thing. Like I'm out at the mall and I hear gunshots down there, so I could draw a firearm and I could just run down there, see a guy, rifle, blah, blah. Like, okay, problem solved. And that's certainly like a thing that could happen within a civilian context, a police context, or whatever. That could absolutely be a thing. But the majority of like violence tends to be personal violence, whether you're talking about like robberies, carjackings, tend to be very common things, where now you're adding a proximity problem, as well as, the potential of like multiple opponents. Like most predators that are successful are pack hunters. And so then you add like a whole different thing, because it's like, you're like, okay, like a pistol seems like a really good problem solver when all your problems are 10 yards away.
Yeah.
It becomes very different when your problems are 4 feet away.
Yeah.
Because now it's like you have all the problems. You still got to get the gun out, still got to get it on target and deliver hits. The guy's close enough. He's easily going to be on top of you if he wants to be on top of you. But it's also like you don't know the intentions, right? Like this is just some dude at a gas station. Like hey bud, you got a lighter, and you're like, oh, boom, sucker punch, like, carjacking, robbery initiated with that. Like that's how real violence tends to happen. And so then that opens you up into like a whole new realm. And that's where like, my training focus is on, is just because it's like, hey, obviously I think handguns and guns in general are awesome. I think you should carry one, but it's like, okay, now let's try to put you in kind of some more realistic, like positions where this happens. And it's just, man, it kind of sucks because in some ways you become less confident once you start to get a little bit of like your training, and then you kind of hit that curve again on that, because it's like man, I thought I was good. I had a 1.5 second draw at 7 yards, but it's like, but the dude was at 3 feet. Now now it sucks.
Yeah. I think the dry fire drill, like that's really cool because I fall in that category. Like actually pulling the trigger with live ammunition is super fun. Like that's the fun part. And so, but knowing that so much of like even your training is dry fire and just getting that target acquisition, I think is pieces that most I fall in that category. Like most of us overlook that piece of it. It's like, hey, I'll go out. Like I've got a sweet little pistol set up down at our house with some steel targets and stuff, and go out there and shoot. But I get out there not nearly enough because that's like the super fun stuff. But that dry fire stuff is,
and it's like a good problem to have, but it's also kind of a bad problem, which is that like the act of shooting live is so much fun that you just want to go out and like,
right.
Because it's very similar to like the jiu-jitsu problem. It's like just rolling live in jiu-jitsu is so much fun that like guys don't want to go drill or position spar or do like technique work. It's like, so you go to the gym, if you don't like kind of be like, all right, hey, bring it up, this is what we're doing. Like if you just stand there for like 10 seconds, dudes will just start rolling, like
start fighting
because it's fun, And like the shooting thing is kind of the same, where it's like like you said, it's fun to go out and shoot.
Yeah.
And I mean, you should be doing live fire stuff. Don't get me wrong, but it's like the foundations of all your stuff should come from the dry fire because one, it's much easier to do, but it's also like you can't identify, or at least maybe not as easily identify a lot of your mechanical issues with the gun live, because obviously like when you're having trouble with your trigger manipulation, so you have overactive shooting hand, so you're in some way like driving into the gun in a way that you shouldn't be. It's like that shows up on the target as like misses, typically pushing to your left if you're a right-handed shooter. But there's a moment where that happens, and then there's an explosion in your face, and the gun cycles. And particularly when you're like not like at a very high level, you can't recognize the problems, because you don't get to see it happen. Because the instant the problem happens is when there's an explosion in your face. Whereas in dry fire, especially if you're using like a red dot or whatever, you're like, hey, I transitioned that target, start hitting the trigger, now I see the dot whipping like that. I'm like, okay, that's me, right? Like the gun ain't doing, there's nothing happening to it. So everything that I see happening to the gun is me doing it. So that's like a really big component of the, kind of like your mechanical work on that.
And that's all just from the dry fire side or from the active?
From the dry fire, yeah.
Dry fire.
Yep.
And then what do you run for? You talked about your equipment, but what do you actually use for when you shoot competitively?
The guns I use are right now. It's a CZ Shadow 2, which is a competition-specific gun. So
that's out of the box, ready to go, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So it's an all-metal gun. It's a double action, single action. So the double action pole is probably like 6 or 7 pounds. Single action is probably like 3 pounds. So it's very, very purpose-driven for that. And like I think mine's got some brass grips on it, and so like with an empty magazine in it, which is how they weigh it, to see if you make equipment standards at competition. I think it's like 56 ounces. Like it is a big old thing. But this is the first year I shot that. So prior to this year, I've been shooting CZ P10s, which is a polymer frame striker fire gun. I mean, it's the P10F is basically the same size as Glock 17. Awesome guns. So I shoot that. Then for magazines, I have. I have the stock Shadow 2 mags for training, and then I have like some nickel-plated ones that I use in competition, just because they tend to drop free a little bit, like more reliably. So they're because it's a little slicker, So and then base pads, I've got like Henning Group base pads. So it's like a +3 base pad on there. So the magazine I start with in the gun is a 24 round mag. So I've got 24 plus 1. So I got 25 rounds in the gun if it's just a regular loaded start. And then I have 3 more mags on my belt. So I have 4 total mags, like when I run a stage. And then the dot that I use, Trijicon SROs are the dots that I use right now. So those are, as it sits right now, it's the best dot, and it's the one with the most amount of usage and like feedback. There's been a couple other ones that have come on like this year to kind of challenge that specifically, like big window, like good brightness controls or whatever, but they're new for this year. They're a little cheaper, which is good, but they don't have the track record yet. So they might turn out to be like a perfectly good option, but it's one of those we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
Kind of things.
Are those like the Hollow Sun was it 507?
507
Yeah.
comp. Yep, that's one of them.
That's
That's
one you told me about.
you know.
Hollison's always coming out with stuff, it seems like, to try to compete with
Yeah.
Trigicon. That's
Yeah.
like their main thing. And it is a lot cheaper. It might be. They're coming out with mini optics all the time, closed emitter, all that stuff,
Yep.
all that fancy stuff that's
And then
I
do you,
shot those
closed
until-
emitters?
So last year I switched to an SRO part of the way through the season just because I'd been shooting Hollow Suns when I started Carry Optics in 2020, and my problem with them is that like they're inconsistent in how reliable they are. So for me, I mean, like when I'm training starting about April, I'll probably shoot like 1,500 rounds a week, like training wise. So it's like the very first Hollow Sun I had, I bought it used. Well, I just bought the pistol and it was on there already. I personally put 38,000 rounds on that dot. And the only problem I had was at Nationals, one of the brightness settings stopped working. So not the dot, but just like one of the brightness settings. Cool. Like no problem. And they, like Hollow Sun's always been really good to me. Like when I send them a dot that doesn't work, they'll just send me back a new dot. But the problem is that like I got to the point where I was like every 4,000 to 7,000 rounds, like the dot would go out. But it's like that's kind of a little
a big
bit too
window.
much of a window. And especially for someone that shoots as much as I do, that's every like 2.5 weeks.
Do you mean go out as in battery power or
No,
go
just
stop working?
Yeah, for whatever reason, So it's like, so if it was 8,000 rounds every time, I'd have no problem sticking with like the 507Cs or the 407Cs or what I had because I like them. They're good dots, and then I could be like, hey, once you get 6,000 rounds on it, rotate it out, send that back because it's going to break, put a new one on, and just keep going. But the problem is it's been just inconsistent enough that it's like I had one die on me on a stage at a major match a couple years back, and so I shot the whole stage without the dot on because it just quit working, and so then I switched to the SROs. And the problem, like when I was first buying the Hollow Suns, they were $209, and I was like, okay, I'm poor. This I can work with, and they've gotten a little bit more expensive, but the SROs are like mid 500s, like just kind of depending on when you catch a little bit of a sale or not on them. So it's just like if that 507 comp that you guys are talking about, if it turns out to be everything that people are hoping it is, it's what, $150 cheaper per or so,
Yeah.
maybe $200 cheaper. So that would definitely be a big time game changer.
I have a Loophole Delta Pro, and I really like how big the window is. I also have a Trigicon RMR, and the only thing, the window is really nice. Like the big window on the Loophole is really nice, but I just don't like that dot as much because it doesn't adjust to the light on its own, and it seems like the battery dies quick, and it just doesn't seem as rugged as the other ones, But
I
that
have
little
a-
square window is also really annoying too.
I've got a Delta Point Pro right now because when I was moving away from the Hollow Suns, there were no SROs available. Like they're just like the market just didn't have any, so I had to buy a Delta Point Pro. And I'm kind of the same. Like I don't like that it's a single button control. So it's like, so if you need to be brighter, you just click it. But if it's like if it's on the down cycle, you have to click it all the way until it hits the bottom, and then click it all the way until it comes back up. The dot's kind of orange instead of red. It's
Yeah.
not like a real hard, crisp color. And then the battery cover really sucks because it's just that little spring-loaded trap door, and it's like it'll get out of whack. And I've had to send that one back and have it replaced. And
I don't really know what the hours are on it, but it seems like mine's always dead.
Yeah.
And when I use it, it's like, I'm like,
That's convenient.
dead again. I mean, yeah. So it's just not a training gun. It doesn't go. Yeah. So yeah.
no, and it's one of those. And I used to be, kind of a guy who would try to wiggle my way around, bargains or whatever. And one of my buddies, he was actually the first, like my buddy Rick, he was like one of the first pistol classes I ever took. And he was the first person I ever heard say, buy once, cry once. And once I kind of moved into that, I was like, that's the way to do it. It sucks. Like nobody wants to go, like if you're trying to set yourself up for like Carry Optics division, competition shooting, you need 2 guns, at least 2 dots. So you're like, hey, if you're shooting Shadow 2s, like to get one set up, it's like, hey, that's $1,600 plus a dot, So it's like, hey, you're looking at putting $4,000 into that, but it's like, all right, you could skimp around and get that down to like $3,000, and then you could be playing the crap my dot doesn't work game all the time, and by the time you get finished, you're going to spend more money than that, and you're going to have problems anyways. Where it's like, man, like if you need a good carried dot. And there's more than one out there. Like I have a lot of experience with SROs. Just go spend $550. Get an SRO. Just like every year on your birthday, change the battery regardless, and just be done with it. Just take that whole problem off your plate and just, just stop. Don't worry about it. Don't try to cut corners here and there.
And that's your comp gun. What do you, when you do your classes with people, do you try to push them in a direction if they don't have a firearm for a carry gun? Do you have a direction you push people or a gun you like?
I pretty much always just recommend, from the major manufacturers, a polymer frame striker fire gun. Your Glocks, your CZs are really good. Why am I drawing a total blank? Like Walther's good. Smith & Wesson M&Ps are pretty good. The Canics have come on the market in a big way. I don't really know if they're like duty ready or like carry ready, but they've come into competitions in a pretty big way the last couple
They're real
years.
lightweight. I have a Canic.
Yeah. And that's, and if they turn out to be like good enough for that, I have no problem pushing people. Like I'm not like,
You're not a Glock guy?
yeah, well, I'm not like a Harley Davidson guy or whatever, where it's like I have Glocks, like, I'm carrying a Glock right now. Like, but I'm a CZ guy. I prefer those for the polymer guns, but I have different carry guns, and I don't care. It's like, it needs to be a gun that we know is from a reputable manufacturer, that we know has a track record of being a good gun. And then I would say within that, you're better off sticking to like the primary calibers, like 9mm King for obvious reasons. There's nothing that's inherently wrong about 45. It's been around a long time doing what it does. 40 sucks. I steer people away from 40. It's just,
Why do you like 40?
it's too snappy. It's too hard on the guns. It wears them out. Ammo's more expensive. It's much more difficult for people to shoot, particularly in carry type of guns, because they're usually smaller gun, polymer frame, so they're lighter, so they tend to be very snappy in the hand. If it's revolvers, like 38 special revolvers, like 22 mag, like I carry a 22 mag revolver all the time, so like things that we kind of know have come in and proven themselves reliable. It's like, hey, stick with the normal stuff. It's like if you're going to tell someone to buy a car, it's like you try to explain some sort of like wicked new this or that, or I heard the Tesla this time is really reliable, or you're like, man, just go get a Toyota Tundra, like go get a Chevy Silverado, go get a Honda Civic. Like, we know for a fact that
Those first two were trucks.
Yeah. Tanner doesn't have a truck. His wife drives it.
I also don't have a truck, but
But you don't have a wife that drives a truck, though, and you don't.
that's true. Like, but I think simple solutions, like stick to the basics on that. As far as telling people what to get.
Are you an iron sight or optic for a carry gun for people?
I'm super pro dot in general, but I don't think that you're in any way like wrong or undergunned because you have iron sights. Like this gun that I've got today it's one of mine explicitly set up to just be an iron sight, like very bare bones, like kind of gun. So I'm not married to like, it has to be this or that. Like, I stick to like, make sure that we have platforms we know are reliable, that are like of reputable manufacturer. Make sure your ammunition is like of solid, reputable, like, factory ammunition. Make sure your holster comes from somebody that's, that we know makes quality holsters. It should be Kydex at this point. Your clips should be DCC, like steel clips. You shouldn't have plastic clips or anything like that. It's like, just stick to like these like real basic like kind of guidelines. And then within that, like, like knock yourself out. Like iron sights, perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Like, what I always tell people is like, the slide mounted dot has completely taken over the pistol shooting world, and for good reason. The performance ceiling of a dot is way higher than iron sights, but I also think the floor is lower. So like, if we just had, if you just gave somebody a gun with a dot today, and like, all right, start with this, it was like, but you gotta carry it and go through like a live scenario. They're probably going to be much worse off than if you gave them an iron sight gun, because they're going to draw, they're not going to see the dot, they're going to be doing like this, trying to find it or whatever. So they're not really going to get the high-end performance advantages of having it. They're still going to be either kind of, point shooting or using the outline of the frame of the gun or the top of the dot housing to aim, where it's like, hey, if I just gave you like my Glock 48 I've got, it's got an XS big dot, which is just a big green blob for a front sight on there. If I just gave that to you and it's like, hey, when you draw it, you can't help it. It's just going to be up in front of your face. And I'm like, hey, put the green thing in the general vicinity of what you're trying to put a hole in and like rock and roll. And you'd be better off with that, like to start. But you definitely, your performance would not be, like your ceiling would be much lower, if that makes sense.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. That's some good info. Anybody else got anything for him? Tanner, you don't have a gun, do you?
Yeah, not on me.
You just got one though, didn't you?
I thought you had 2 of them all the time.
Didn't you just get one though? Not that long ago.
Nicole got the Smith & Wesson Easy. I have the SIG 365.
SIG, that's another one. I kind of have a personal vendetta against SIG, but they seem to do okay stuff. Like, whenever I'm
pissed
put
you
on the
off?
spot to try to come up with like, hey, what are like the 5 reputable manufacturers for carry guns? Like, I always like get stuck at like 3. I'm like, I don't know, like Glock, CZ, Walther, and then I can always never remember like whatever else.
Where are your thoughts on like the staccatos? I mean, they're a expensive high-end gun, obviously, but all of us have talked about. I don't know. Has anyone shot? I haven't shot one.
I've shot one.
I've shot one. I mean, they were super nice, but
Now in the competitive scene, obviously you've hammered some guns through. Like that's just like casual, like the way we were probably just shooting them. I know yours might have been a little more, but I mean, as far as the way we shoot them, like, but are they worth the money?
I think if you're not going to put the time in to like train real hard and to get real good with them, you're going to get a minimal amount of like benefit. But like, and again, I'm one of those guys where like, it's your money, man. Like spend it on whatever. But if you're like, hey, like Brett Carter needs like, you know, he's got $4,000 to spend on guns and ammo and training. Like, what should I do? I would be like Glock 17 and however much ammo the rest of that $3,500. You know, because it's, so the thing with like the STIs or whatever is that usually what people like about them is that they're a single action gun. So the trigger is very user friendly as far as like being able to, you know, manipulate the gun without driving it off a target. But they're very expensive. Inherently, I mean, now granted they're a pretty big market presence, but you're gonna have more issues like taking care of it compared to like a Glock or something like that. Then you're also introducing the fact that it's got a manual safety. So it's a little bit different manual of arms on the gun. Whereas one thing that's like very nice about all the polymer frame striker fire guns, it's like, hey, magazine in, run the slide, put it in the holster. When it comes out, press the trigger, and she goes bang. There's nothing else going on with it. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But the 2011 is extremely, like, you have to have a 2011 in limited division to be competitive, pretty much. And then all the open guns are 2011 guns that are then hacked up and have everything added onto them to make them into the race gun. So the 2011 is huge.
And why does that make it competitive? Because I mean, a 2011, I mean, isn't really. I mean, looking at it from the layman's, it's not really much different of a gun.
Well, it's like, I mean, one, it's the fact, like, the single action trigger is like the big thing with them. It's just like, I mean, especially if you're going to like tune it and mess with it. Like some of those guys are getting down to like 1 pound triggers on that stuff, you know? So it's like, part of it's that you can manipulate it really fast, but then the other thing is that like the lighter the trigger and the easier it is to set it off, the less that you're going to be able to disturb the gun when you're pressing the trigger. So in some ways it's going to compensate for like your own mechanics, you know, when it comes to shooting. But so in that regard, you can really mess with the trigger and get it right down. But also like now you're talking about an all metal gun. So all metal frame gun is going to be a little bit lighter recoiling. It's going to be a little bit like easier. It's going to behave better in the hand compared to, you know, like a polymer frame gun, particularly when you're talking about like in limited division, you have to shoot a 40 cal pretty much to be competitive. So you're talking about a cartridge that's very snappy, much more difficult to manage at speed than 9mm. So you put in an all metal gun, make it really heavy, make the slide now, because you know now you got a metal frame. Now you take the slide, you put a bunch of lightning cuts in it, so the slide's lighter and all that. So now you have less reciprocating mass to drive the gun off target. So it's just a gun that you can do a lot more stuff to try to make it, you know, like really competition user friendly. But then it's like, you know, on the flip side is like, you know, to your question as far as like, you know, using or carrying, it's like now you're basically talking about like trying to drive a Ferrari to go get groceries, like, you know, every day. It's like,
Right.
Okay, does it accomplish that? Sure. Like, is there anything wrong with it? Like, no, but it's also like kind of not necessary. You know, it's like if you got the money, more power to you. But you know,
I did like the Prodigy. I mean, it's got its jamming, but they
did you
put.
ever fix the extractor on that we talked about?
No, I shouldn't shoot 'em. I just buy guns and shoot them a couple times and collect them. You know that. But the nice thing with the weight, they did put a bull barrel on that gun to give it some more weight instead of a compensator.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of their way of getting around a compensator is putting a bull barrel on it.
Yeah,
and
but
it's a super fun gun to shoot when it doesn't jam.
yeah.
Most of them are.
Yeah, but no, I think Springfield actually did pretty decent with that. I think. I mean, I know their Echelon has gotten good reviews.
But I haven't used one of theirs before, so I'll have to, at some point. And then
I think Springfield makes good, but they could probably make better. Like to be more competitive, I think they can make better products than they do. But
well, and they've found their place in the market, which is that I don't, and I carried XDs for years. That's what I started out with, and honestly, I think it's a better gun than its reputation gets in like the serious circles. Like I had nothing but perfectly fine luck with mine, but I think like Springfield is perfectly happy making guns that they know aren't Glocks, but that are roughly comparable, and then selling them for the same price in like the market that they do. Like they're not trying to supplant, Glock or Walther in like the carry duty gun or competition gun kind of thing, or whatever. I think they know where their market is, and they're like, that's cool. Like we're fine with this segment of the market, and that's what we do,
And I always like their grip safeties on the XTs, and I know a lot of people don't like grip safeties, but I also like 1911s.
Yeah.
But I think on the Echelon, didn't they go away from that? We molested that one at Shields that day.
It doesn't have a grip safety.
Yeah,
No.
and I always kind of liked it. It was just the extra little feature on it. They were ready to go.
Well, and that was why, and again, like when I think back to like my Marine Corps days, like that was, one of the reasons why like I was choosing between that and a Glock. And in hindsight, I should have got the Glock, but it's like part of it's, it's like not fully understanding, because like at that time, like I was interested in like shooting like pistol. Like my buddy had a Glock 21 that we kept on base because that's totally illegal and everything. But I was like, oh man, you rack this thing, and it's just like that's it. He also didn't have a holster because like nobody had holsters at the time, so it's just like
Just free floating.
Yeah, well,
Just
we
in the
didn't
pocket walking
carry
around?
it. It's just like you take it to the range, you just like load it when you use it, and then take it back to the freaking table or whatever. So that was kind of one of the things that got me, like moved me towards the XD on that. But then one of the problems is that like, it just becomes like a piece on there that can fail. Like I had like my one before it like totally like blew up. I must have had like 65, 70,000 rounds through that gun, and the safety like didn't work at all. But it also didn't jam the gun up. And I was like,
So it failed, but it didn't fail the gun itself.
I was like, yeah, because like one of the problems that people have with the grip safety on them is that you can get things in there, or something will happen mechanically with that grip safety, and it'll basically jam the gun up. Because you've seen it, like you obviously have to depress the grip safety to be able to run the slide. So if something goes mechanically wrong with that, where the grip safety is kind of pressed in, but it's not actually disengaging, then the gun won't run. So whatever was wrong with mine, it didn't work in like all of the regards. And I was like, that's perfect.
fine.
That's exactly what I was hoping for.
Total failure. That's fine.
Nice. You guys got anything? Are we good? Have any questions for him?
I'm good.
Where's so you do train people. So where can they get a hold of you if it's something they want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my website, and I've got like all the usual social media stuff. It's just Bastion Black Performance.
You want to spell that for people in case they're stupid?
BASTIONBLACKPERFORMANCE. Boom.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know how hard that was for you. Now imagine other people.
Well, listen, I don't expect a lot of Omaha barbell people are going to be able to type out that many letters.
Whoa.
That's what autofill's for.
Oh, we have some of the upper echelon in here of people.
Listen,
Not in this room, but
And you said you have a YouTube channel too.
Yeah, I have like YouTube and Instagram and my website, and I've got a class.
OnlyFans or anything you're doing? Okay, well.
Google it.
I'm not opposed to it, like listen, competition shooting is expensive.
Actually,
man,
I did see a guy the other day, and I can't remember what he was. And it wasn't like any kind of selling pictures of his asshole on the internet, but he did an OnlyFans, and that's like he did lessons or like master classes almost through OnlyFans.
Well, like Craig Jones, who's like a very big like submission grappler, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, like he famously has an OnlyFans, but he just puts Jiu-Jitsu videos up on it.
Yeah, this guy, I was like, it's probably not a smart idea. I don't remember what it was. He had like an ad or something on like Instagram came through or something he taught, and it's like you can look at our OnlyFans, and I was like, that's
You
weird.
didn't see my sticker with my OnlyFans like handle on my Mercury out there?
No. The fact that you still have a Mercury is impressive, minus the OnlyFans sticker.
I mean, it's not a
the
new
Mountaineer.
Mercury, all right? Oh yeah, of course it's
Yeah.
Mountaineer. Like it's an old dog. Like she's got some miles on her, but
Hey, it still goes forward and backward.
that it does. It's got 4-wheel drive, but no, I got all that, and got a class coming up here in town this winter, so people want to do that. It's going to be at one of my buddies' MMA gyms, and if any of you guys want to come and rock and roll in there, it's.
I don't like to breathe hard or get sweaty. So is there like just a shooting portion we can show up for?
Sorry, you're gonna have to breathe hard. I can't take that away from you.
Not to like go too much deeper into this, but like you had mentioned, like once physical violence becomes in, like it's a game changer. And again, like only dabbled into jiu-jitsu for a little bit before my body was like, listen, we're broken, stop. But like I didn't have high expectations of my physical performance in like an actual fight to begin with, but I didn't think they were as shitty as they were. But like, so if you get the opportunity to go to like something like that and you can really feel what it's like to actually fight someone for more than 15 seconds, like that's a reality check of like how fast scenarios
Little humbling
change.
for you.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I just threw up all the time. Is all I did. I would fight for like a minute.
We
and
talk about this like in like a class that I went to here like a month ago, which is like, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and all that or whatever. You
don't have to use the air quotes. Like you actually are a black belt.
That's fair. It sounds cool to people that don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but to people that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they're like, okay.
Okay.
Now,
cool.
when you compete, do you compete in masters or open?
Masters, yeah.
Ooh, fuck you, Brett.
Listen,
I make fun of John Hansen. I told him his Masters World Championship doesn't count because it's not real.
but yeah, it's funny because like the more that you train to fight, it's like, I mean, yes, I'm more capable of fighting now from like a skill standpoint, but it's like I think the thing you become most aware of is how easy it is to get hurt fighting.
Yes.
It's like, and not even from like the impact of fighting, but it's like, oh, in the course of taking you down, I hit my knee weird on the ground, or it's like, or like my thumb is really messed up from this class I took like a month ago. I think I just got it caught in a guy's sweatshirt when we were kind of like fighting. I think it just kind of got like pulled to the side, and it still met. Like, I mean, it's like I've been taping it to the side of my hand just to train, and I'm like, what a stupid freaking like thing to have happen. Like this, I mean, this is liable to take like the better part of a year to get better because it's probably ligament damage or whatever there, And it's like, great. Like that was for like a 47-second like live evolution, like fighting a guy over guns and stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So it's, like you were like said, it's like one, you become aware of like how maybe good or not good you are, but it's also just like fighting hurts. Like it's cool when you win. But it's like it hurts.
Yeah, but if you lose, like there's big consequences.
Yeah, especially like you talk about like like social violence or whatever.
Right.
Versus like
there's no one to say, oh, he tapped, stop.
Yep.
Like it's whatever they want to do to you, they're gonna do.
Yep. Or there's no. Now you're not getting punched and flash knockout falling on the mats. You're falling on gravel or concrete or now probably not you because you're a large male. But it's like now you're getting picked up and slammed on the concrete instead of the mats or something like that. Yeah, it's.
So is the class that you're running, is it like a self-defense type, like fighting close?
Yeah, like I teach a couple different kinds of classes. The main one I do, I call it combative handgun solutions because like for me, it's basically like how to deal with everything from like 0 to 5 yards. So like it could be problems that you solve by simply like being able to move your feet, make space, maybe draw a weapon. Could be as simple things like, maybe just kind of framing, moving a guy and be able to move off all the way down to like, hey, guy initiates sucker punch. How do I cover, entangle up, clinch up, maybe have to wrestle a little bit, like, to get control, to get him off me, to get to weapons. Like I kind of, I deal with that from the whole spectrum just to kind of like, for me, it's to try to put people like statistically when it comes to civilians involved in defensive gun uses, the preponderance of things tend to happen between like 3 and 5 yards. And then when you add like strictly the like not guns related, obviously if you want to touch somebody, you got to be close enough to touch them. So while you should, while I still kind of keep in the back of my head like the active shooter related stuff or like having to deal with that, it's like, hey, when it comes down to like the actual personal experience of violence, it's going to be like rough. Like Tom Gibbons is a very well-known trainer, and his basic thing is like the vast majority, like 87, 89% of all incidents take place within the length of a car. Like that's a good visual. So it's like you can imagine a lot of different things. Like that might be enough space where you can move around, you can do stuff, or it also might be like, hey, you're nipple to nipple, like, nose to nose, gotta do a little stuff to make it happen. And so that's pretty much what I do for classes, and it's not as intense as it comes. Like we'll do a couple.
You're not just mauling people from behind surprise
it's like
attack.
Most of my classes, kind of like relatively lower speed, like 30% kind of, you go one, I go one kind of drilling. Like get guys like a ton of reps. And then at the end of the class, and I don't like to call them live reps because it kind of conjures up to like, hey, Matt steps out, I step out, 2 men enter, 1 man leave kind of thing. It's like, I just call it live or like position sparring. It's like, hey, I'm just going to set you up in kind of not scenario, but like just kind of a situation. And then I'll usually brief the bad guy. I'm like, hey, here's the kind of thing that I want. And then let you guys kind of go. But it's also like, you can't punch each other full force, even with helmets and stuff on. Right. It's like, if you got training knives, you still can't take a training knife and stab a guy full force. Like you would still cause an actual wound with that, So just trying to introduce people in a safe or a less dangerous way to deal with some of that. But
Tanner has his own helmet.
I do. I have a large head.
I saw him at the grocery store last night, walking down the aisles. Then black bicycle helmet.
Yeah.
You probably couldn't see anything in the aisles past his head, though. But other than that,
Totally clips.
Just knocking cans off.
all right, then we appreciate you coming on, man. Some good info. Hopefully, get some people out to your class.
Yeah,
check it out. Some of our dozens and dozens of listeners.
Like easily tens of listeners are paying attention right this second.
Yeah,
Most of them are in the room.
Yeah, yeah. If this was live, man, could you imagine?
What if you just move the table out onto the turf and like let the gym people interact with
We talked about it, but it's so loud. Like these
I agree,
microphones just pick up so much stuff. But
They're
it would
better
be
than our
cool.
old ones.
Oh, the
I
old
listened to one of our first episodes, and we sound awful.
Yeah.
that. And like, I'll be honest, like I'm kind of a turf Nazi. Like if I came in to work out and there was like something going on in the turf,
You and BJ.
I would be like,
Dude, my speed ladders here, bro.
Fucking BJ.
I like Donahoe. No, he's one of my real good friends.
Yeah.
He's a large human.
He's a very
He's
huge
huge.
human. Yeah.
One of my clients was working out, and I gave her a little circuit to do, and Donna was on the back extension. She goes, "Do you have someone else I can do?" Go, "Well, tell him to get the fuck off of there." She goes, "I'm not gonna stay. I don't know him." I go, "That's fine. You don't have to know him. Just tell him to get the fuck off of there."
He's like, no, he's such a teddy bear, but like, he's also capable of physically mauling.
Right,
you as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So
Yes.
it's like,
Yes,
And he's huge.
and I always wonder how two Neanderthalic people like him and John found each other. I don't know if there's some kind of mating call they have that they
I
can
think
bring.
so. Yeah.
It's like on Transformers, and they call them all to the planet. Like, do they just like go outside? And they just like,
well, like
shout in the air.
Donahoe is actually solely responsible for John surviving for like multiple years, because like basically Donahoe had to be his babysitter.
Well, John lived with him for a while.
Well, exactly. That's exact. Like, and if you want some stories about how ridiculous an adult human male can be, ask Donahoe for some John roommate stories. And then John met Christina.
Which that's
wife,
Donahoe. So Donahoe kind of owes me because I got him and Christina set up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Like, so then once Donahoe was able to successly hand pass John off to Christina, then that must have been a great day for him. Like just
Like he had a party, and John's like, "Oh, you had a party? I didn't know." Yeah, no, I know.
correct.
You're right.
Yes. Like,
You're right. You didn't know.
I want to make sure this part stays
Right.
in, so we can
Oh,
send
yeah.
that to John like
Yeah.
explicitly.
All right, I want to thank you guys for listening. Share the show with everybody you know, and even if you don't like it, it's fine. Just tell everybody you don't like us.
Yeah.
We just want to, educate, entertain, keep it real with you guys. We'll see you guys next time.